Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's Women of the Bible series. I appreciate all of your support as always. And I want to say something, and I don't know if I've ever said this before, um, but if there is a particular woman of the Bible that you are interested in having me present, please feel free to drop it in the comments or send it to me in an email. I will definitely do all the research and the studying, and she'll be on here. So if you have a favorite, just let me know, and you will get to see her presented here on Women of the Bible. But we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's story. As always, I like to give you a little backstory so we don't just jump in the middle and not know what happened before we got to that point. So tonight, our story comes from the book of Genesis, and the women, it's going to be two of them, the women are Hagar and Sarah. Okay? There's some other people as well, but we're going to focus on Hagar and Sarah, their relationship. I'm gonna start with Abraham. Actually, I said Sarah and Hagar, but I'm gonna start, I think, with Abraham. Abraham was married to Sarah, and Abraham was old. Abraham was about 100 years old, literally about 100 years old, and Sarah was about 90. And Sarah was childless. She was barren, could not have children, but of course she wanted children. During that time, having children, especially a son, was very important. Your wealth, your legacy, your lineage, all of that went to your son, went to your heir. So if you did not have an heir, if you didn't have a son, then you would have to choose someone, and it would just be a random person. In this case, Abraham had chosen one of his slaves to be his heir because he did not have any children. And at 100, it did not seem likely that he would have any children. But that changed because God came to Abraham and he made a promise to Abraham that he would be a father of nations. He told Abraham, "Come on outside with me. Let me show you something." They go outside, and God tells Abraham, "Look up at the stars and tell me if you can count them. And if you can count them, that's how many descendants will come from you. That's how your line is going to run." Even though Abraham was 100 years old and his wife was knocking on 100, he believed God. He believed God. He was a man of faith, and he did not doubt. Even looking at what was around him, he did not doubt what God said. But even though he didn't doubt what God said, Sarah had a plan. Sarah wanted a child. She wanted a child. And she came up with her own way of getting that child. Her way was to take one of her slaves and to have Abraham marry the slave and have a child that way. So that's what she did. And the slave that she chose was named Hagar. So Hagar and Abraham get married. Hagar becomes pregnant. And immediately, the Bible says that Hagar began to despise Sarah. Now, right there, um, there were, I research and I delve and I look for information, and I always, if you guys know or read something different or have an insight or another perspective, please share it with me because that's how we learn from each other. It did not specifically say why Hagar began to despise Sarah. So it kind of left it up to your own, interpretation or your own reason why you would think that would be. Maybe she was, because at first, my first angle on that was that she got pregnant and she started feeling like, oh, I got the baby, you can't have a baby, and I'm queen bee. But I read it again, and when I read it again, and I asked God, open up that discernment, open that discernment. I read it again, and then I had to get those words. Hagar was a slave. She didn't have a choice. She was chosen for whatever reason. I don't know if she may have physically resembled Sarah, where if the child came out, Sarah would think, well, maybe the child will look enough like me. She may have just had other qualities or features that Sarah found appealing, that she wanted to see in the child. It doesn't say why she particularly chose Hagar, but Sarah chose Hagar, the slave. And then Abraham had sex with her and she became pregnant. And it says that once she became pregnant, she began to despise Sarah. So then I said, that wasn't a woman, in my opinion, that was looking at it like, oh, I'm about to have this baby and you can't. I'm forced into a position that I don't want to be in. And I'm pregnant with a child that I'm not going to get a chance to raise, because Sarah did not intend for Hagar to keep the baby. The intent was for her to have the baby, and then Sarah and Abraham raised the baby. So there's a lot of different dynamics there. Did Hagar despise her because maybe she felt like she had been raped? And not only have I been raped, but then you're going to take the baby from me? Or even if Abraham didn't, if it wasn't a forceful situation and she didn't feel violated like that, you're going to take my child. So we can't really make an assumption as to why Hagar began to despise Sarah. But when she did, Sarah was surprised. Sarah was actually shocked. And she goes complaining to Abraham. Now that Hagar is pregnant, she's being disrespectful to me. She is not treating me right. So Abraham basically said, look, that's your slave. Don't come in here talking to me. This was your idea, so you need to deal with it. So Sarah's way of dealing with it, she began to mistreat Hagar. She began to treat her poorly. And so again, that's what made me think that Hagar was not angry because, or Hagar wasn't feeling herself because she was pregnant. Because if that was the case, then when Sarah started to mistreat her, it would have been more of a back and forth, but it wasn't. Hagar ran away. She ran away. And when she ran away, she stopped by a stream to rest. And an angel came and asked her, where are you going? Where are you coming from? And where are you going? What does it feel like when an angel asks you where you're going? What do you say? I think if an angel asked me where I was going, baby, I don't know. I wouldn't even know what to say. Where you going? Look, an angel asks you, and you know it's an angel. You don't know what to say because you don't want to get it wrong. It's not that you don't know the answer. You don't want to take a chance on getting it wrong. Is it a trick question? Should I say Walmart, even though I know that's where I'm really going? Is he okay, anyway. But he asked her where she's going. And and I want to get this right because I thought that this was so just so profound in how it was worded. So generally I don't read because I know the story and I just tell the story. But I wanted to read it. I wanted to read it because I wanted to put the emphasis exactly where I felt it needed to go here. And it says, and this is coming from Genesis 16 and 9. It says, then the angel of the Lord said to her, let me move back to Genesis 16 and 7. The angel of the Lord found her by a stream of water in the wilderness, the stream on the way to Shur. He said, Hagar, slave of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going? And she replies, I am running away from Sarah. Now, this is the part right here. This is the part right here. Listen. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, you must go back to your mistress and submit to her mistreatment. You must go back and submit to her mistreatment. That put a pause in me, because as women, and I'm saying as women because this show, it's about women. We're gonna have something for us, okay? If I have some men out there watching, thank you for your support. But I'm gonna take this moment right here for us. Things happen and we feel like God does not know. Things happen and we feel like God does not see. Because how can you know this is happening, God? How can you see this going on and let it continue? How can you let me keep suffering? If you really hear me, if you're really there and you really hear me, why am I still going through what I'm going through? And why am I going through it so long? God told Hagar, go back to Sarah and let her continue to mistreat you. It's a promise in there. See, it's a promise in there. When God sends you back into a situation like that, you better believe it's a promise in there. And it definitely was a promise in there. Hagar goes back and she gives birth, like God said, to a son. God named your children back then. And some of us need to let God name our children now, because some of these names don't be right. But again, that's another video. God named her son, told her son would be named Ishmael, to name him Ishmael. And that's what she did. They go back. She has the baby. Time passes by. Years pass by. Sarah gets pregnant. First thing happened. I don't need the slave baby no more. I don't need your baby mama, and I don't need your baby. We got our own baby now. So she need to go. And that child need to go too. That's what Sarah said. They need to go. You got an heir. I've given you a baby. I don't need her. Now, Abraham, because he loved Ishmael, he did. And he actually asked God, can Ishmael not be my heir? Can he not be the one? And God said, no, he cannot be the one. I will bless him, and I will bless him abundantly. He will have nations, I believe 12 nations, and he will be fruitful and he will be rich and his line will continue and he will be strong. But he is not the one. Sometimes we want what we want, but God's hand will not be forced just because we want what we want. God told Abraham, no, I'll bless him and I'll give him more than, because he is your son, but he is not the one. But when it came to Abraham doing what Sarah said, which was to send them away, he didn't want to do that. He did not. But Abraham, again, just like when God told him that he and Sarah would be parents, Abraham believed God when he said that Ishmael would be taken care of and Ishmael would be king of, would rule nations, that his lineage would go on. He believed him. He didn't worry that Ishmael would perish in the desert. So early in the morning, he gets up and he gets Hagar up and Ishmael, and he gives them bread and water, and he sends them away. And they start walking and walking. And I know it was hot. I know it was hot. I can see her in my mind walking with this baby, walking with he's a teenager, younger, 12, 13 years old by now. I can see him out there walking, and it's hot. And if she like me, she mad, because I get mad when I get hot. And you got a little bit of water. She gets to the point where the water runs out. The water runs out. And she takes her son, because she could not bear to watch him die. So she gets her son. I like this part in case you can't tell. And she puts him up under a tree. And she walks away and she sits down. And it says she begins to weep loudly. They put an emphasis there. Go read it. She wept loudly. But the Bible says that God heard the voice of Ishmael. It didn't say he heard the cries of Hagar or the cries of the mother. He heard the voice of the child. But then he goes to the mother and he asks, what's wrong? What's wrong? It's so much in that. It is so much in that. I'm going to break this down real quick because there's a lot in that. As women, we have a lot of responsibility on us. I'm not going to talk about what's fair. I'm going to talk about what is. We have a lot of responsibility on us. And we do a lot of crying. And I'm not talking about literally crying. Whether it's complaining, whether it's nagging, whether it's just going over the same old thing all the time, over and over and over again. But God is hearing the voice of the child. He's not listening to your crying. He's hearing the voice of the child first. And then he comes to you as the mother, as the adult. And he wants to know what's wrong. Why is that child crying? Why is that child calling out to me? Some of us have to get some things lined up because we so busy crying. God hears you crying. And he's going to come to you. But when he comes to you, he's going to ask you about the other person. He's going to ask you about that other person. He's going to ask you about your household. Okay? You're crying. But what about your children? Is your household in order? Where's your daughter? Where's your son? Your husband? Is your household in order? You loud. But what's going on over here? After she said, we out here. We out here in the desert. And of course she felt like they were going to die. They were going to perish. um, God let her know it's going to be all right. The Bible says God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. It didn't say God dropped a well of water right there. A well of water appeared. God built a well and water started to overflow. The well was already there. The only thing that changed was now she was able to see it. She was able to see it now. We got to stop crying every time we find ourselves in the desert with no water. We have to stop separating ourselves from the situation because we can't deal with it. We have to trust and believe that even if we are in a situation where we're being mistreated, that God knows that we are in that situation. And even if it seems like He's the one that's sending us back into it, that we're going back into it with a purpose. God told her, get that water, give it to your son, get him up, raise him up. I'm going to make him strong. I'm going to give him nations. He's going to be somebody. We need to get ourselves up. We need to get our children up. We need to get our lives up. We need to get our businesses up. We need to get our husbands up. We need to get our families up. Give them some water. Nourish them. Love them. Dust them off. Because God is going to use them. Don't worry about the ones that have mistreated you. Don't worry about that. Because God will still bless you. You're going to be mistreated sometimes. People are going to be unfair. People are going to be just flat out nasty. And God is still going to bless you. He's still going to bless you. Thank you for joining me tonight here on Women of the Bible. I appreciate your support as always. And I pray that you enjoyed tonight's story. I pray that it blessed you and that it encourages you to learn more about Sarah and Hagar. And that the well is already there. The well is there. God just needs to open your eyes up so you can see it. Have a great evening.